Welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Bears Brothers podcast. And I want to welcome you to our last, we're thinking last, there's no way they trade back and gain any more picks here. We're in the seventh round. The Bears are officially on the clock here with the 224th overall pick here in the 2018 NFL draft. After the Bears on day two, they went straight up offense. Today's been strictly defense. They've went defensive tackle, defensive end, an edge rusher, and now we just wait and see to find out who the Bears' final pick is going to be here in the 2018 draft. So yeah, they can go in many different directions. They can go ahead and try to get a project at like offensive tackle. You can go get a secondary, a unit that has not been addressed in the entire draft. They can surprise someone and maybe go with a young quarterback, a young running back, maybe even another wide receiver. Honestly, the opportunities are, well, not opportunities, but the options maybe are endless for the Bears. And real quick before we go, I want to introduce myself. I'm your host, Will DeWitt. I'm joined by my Bears brothers, Chris Bacher, and, well, half Bears brother, I suppose we decided on the last podcast, and Michael Dugan. And Chris, I want to go to you real quick because you were doing a little bit more research on the Bears' prior pick about his athletic ability and fits. You want to go ahead and just share that with our listeners who maybe are wondering, ooh, what? How athletic is he? How did he test out, and who does he compare to?
Actually, our own Steven Letizia posted a post, and I'll bring it up right now. He tested really well for his size. It's just this relative athletic scorecard that I'm not exactly sure who does it, but he tested as a 9.56, and 10 is the highest they go, I believe, and 5 is considered average. So he's well above average in terms of his athleticism. And I mentioned on the last podcast that a player to look for as far as best case scenario, who he could possibly be if he pans out, is Brandon Graham, who was a first-round pick. So I don't think we can expect anything like that.
But they measure about the same, right?
But they measure remarkably consistent. They had their 40 times were within, like, I think 0.3 of a second. They bench press the same. They weigh the same. They had the same about the same 3-cone drill. It's pretty remarkable how consistent they were as far as the testing numbers go.
All right, well, the pick is in, and I can officially announce it here. So with the 224th overall pick in the NFL draft, the Chicago Bears took wide receiver Javon Wims from Georgia. He's 6'2", 215. Last season, he had 45 catches for 720 yards and 7 touchdowns. So here we go. Another wide receiver here by the Bears in this draft, which, of course, it's a position that they've been addressing all offseason long, which to me, I mean, I mentioned it a few minutes ago that they could go ahead and take another receiver, double dip at the position here in the draft. I'm actually still pretty surprised they did that. I figured they might have at least would have taken one player in the secondary. They might have even went with another edge rusher, but I bet you there's some edge rushers here who are in the bottom end on the board or here in the draft that they kind of hope make it to the undrafted free agency kind of period here. They'll start pretty much very soon after this draft ends. So, Michael, I'm going to go over to you. Wide receiver here, one out of Georgia. I know you're watching some tape right now, but just thoughts on the position and, just thoughts on the pick.
I hate to sound like John Gruden here, but they call this guy Jump Ball Javon. This guy's got very soft head. They do. I'm not making that up right now. This guy's got very soft hands. He's got a great vertical leap. I don't know what he tested at the combine, but I remember watching this guy, and it seemed like almost every single game I watched Georgia play this year, I'm thinking, how did he just catch that ball? This is a guy with really, really good hands. He's about 6'3". Will's pulling up his numbers at the combine right now. Looks like he ran just over a 4.5 40 and then a 33.5 vertical jump. I think he's actually a better jumper than that shows. And a 33.5 is nothing to scoff at. But he's got a pretty good vertical. He's got good size. He's got really good hands. This is a pretty good possession receiver. He might have been my number 2 or 3 receiver in terms of my preferences. Given what's left right now, I really like Simi Cobbs out of Indiana. I'm surprised he hasn't gone yet. But I think this is a great pick. He had a good year at Georgia last year. This is a possession guy that could get some pretty decent playing time over the next few years. So I think this is a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, what you're seeing here, he's someone who he doesn't have great speed, but his size is very enticing. Again, the Bears, they've brought a lot of speed to this offense. So you have a guy who can go up and get it. He might project better as like a wide receiver 4 or a wide receiver 5, but he's someone who can go out there in a red zone and go ahead and make some of those jump ball plays of course, in the end zone, put some points up on the board. But Chris, I want to go over to you. Is it fair to say that Ryan Pace loves Georgia? I mean, you went with Roquan Smith. Don't forget about Leonard Floyd couple seasons ago, and now you have another guy here in the 7th round in Wims.
Hey, if you're going to love a college, why not love the one that was in the national championship last year? Javon Wims is pretty interesting. I know I had kind of looked into him before the Bears ever got a guy like Allen Robinson or Taylor Gabriel or Anthony Miller way back when. I was texting, I think it was my little brother, and I said he might be a good guy just as a red zone target. He caught, I want to say, 7 touchdowns last year for a Georgia team that had Nick Chubb and Sony Michel as their running backs, so they didn't do a whole lot of passing. They really relied on that running game. I think he can add something in terms of being a red zone target. Maybe he doesn't make the team, maybe he does, but that's where I think he'll find his niche if he's going to find one in the NFL.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm seeing here he's a guy who is a very decent hands catcher. He's someone who, of course, with his size and the ability to use his hands to catch that ball at the highest point is, at least if he can find a way to break free from NFL corners, which, of course, that's going to be the biggest question mark with his speed translating into the NFL. Then he can go up there, beat those corners on those jump balls. And when he can do that, I think he can find himself a role in this team. But right now, I'm still wondering if he's going to make the roster. The Bears have put so many resources into this position. So right now, I think that's my big question mark. Maybe someone who begins on the practice squad, works his way up, but it's a big bodied receiver who can go ahead, who excels on back shoulder throws. I know, Michael, you're watching some highlights here and some tape on him, but I'm curious, do you have any weaknesses that you've seen so far, or anything that you're maybe worried about here? Again, 7th round pick, there's going to be some, of course, areas that he can sure up his game, but again, he's coming from a great college here in Georgia.
Yeah, based off what I see, he doesn't have tremendous straight ahead speed. It doesn't look like the best route runner, doesn't have the sharpest cuts, could be a little quicker on his feet, but overall he's a pretty athletic dude. He's got a very athletic frame, 6'3", pretty slender 6'3", but he's a physical runner. He seeks contact. He can go up and get the ball. So this is a guy that, in terms of a possession receiver, not much is going to phase him pretty much right out of the gates, especially compared to other rookies and first and second year guys in the league. But like you said, Will, this is a team that's invested a lot into the wide receiver position. So I don't know if they expect him to make a roster spot or to just increase the competition throughout the summer and into the early fall for who's going to get playing time. I don't know what they have planned for this guy, but look, if he can make the roster, I think he could make a pretty decent impact in a couple of years. He's a great possession receiver. He's got great hands, and to complement Allen Robinson in terms of deep threats or guys that you can kind of lob the ball up to, like I said, jump ball Javon. Maybe this is a guy that can make an impact. Who knows? I think it's a pretty decent pick.
All right, so a pretty decent pick for you, and this is actually pretty interesting. I'm just pulling up Pro Football Focus's big board because he actually made their top 100 list, and the Bears picked at 224. And again, Pro Football Focus, take it with a grain of salt, of course, but for them to have him in their top 100 players, I mean, that's exciting because he's here at 224. The Bears got him, so at least there's some value there. But Chris, over to you. How do you think he fits within maybe Matt Nagy's offense?
I was actually just looking at the Kansas City Chiefs offense to see if he had a comparable receiver within that scheme. They don't make it easy to order by position, do they?
Always something, right? Live shows.
I think, like I said, I think he could be a good red zone target. I think that's one thing the Chiefs lacked last year, and it reflected in their red zone conversion rate as far as converting red zone trips into touchdowns. They didn't have a lot of tall guys. They had Travis Kelce, obviously. But other than that, they didn't have a lot of big receivers. So I think he could definitely be a big receiver in this Bears offense. I think he runs pretty good slants. I think he caught a few touchdown passes on slants, if I remember correctly. It's an interesting pick. I think practice squad might be where he's destined to go this first year, like you mentioned before. But he could definitely make something happen with his NFL career if he continues to work hard. One interesting thing about him is that he wasn't immediately dedicated to football straight out of high school. He actually took, I think, 2 years playing basketball, decided he wanted to go back to football, went to a JC, and then transferred to Georgia in 2016, and then had his junior and senior year there. So he was a little bit older, but a few of Pace picks this year have been on the older side. I think it was Kevin Fishbane tweet that you mentioned, where Kylie Fitz and Anthony Miller are both older than Jordan Howard.
Yeah. So the Bears are going a little bit older, but again, they went really young, especially at someone like a James Daniels, who is only 20. So again, you're getting a combination of different players coming from different backgrounds, coming from, of course, different schools, smaller, bigger. Georgia. Well, you have a couple coming from Georgia. Roquan Smith, he's not going to be coming here alone to Chicago, so maybe he already has himself a roommate once he gets over to Lake Forest. But no, honestly, when you look at Wims, I really like the size, right? 6'4" is what you see here on this chart, and 215. And when you have a guy of that size, I mean, right now that compares to like an Allen Robinson. So now you have two bigger bodied receivers to go with like the smaller guys of like, of course, a Miller and now a Taylor Gabriel here in Chicago. You got a lot of speed. Now you bring a little bit of size to the equation, and it just gives a defense something else, just a little bit more to worry about. Michael, when you're looking at Wims, I want to know, again, 7th round pick. He's a project. He's someone who he's not even guaranteed to make the roster. But if you had to guess, would he make it? And if so, like, what would you maybe anticipate throughout a rookie year in a quarterback group that went from being one of the worst last season to now being one that is jam-packed full of what I'm calling pretty decent talent now from top to bottom?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't know, with your point of making the team, I think he could, and I certainly hope he can. I think it's likely. And I think this is a guy we're looking at high ceiling, low floor. I think if this is a guy that, like you guys have said, he started playing football 4 years ago, and he was the top contributor, the top receiver at Georgia, who was a play away from winning the national championships. 7 touchdowns last year, over 700 yards on a 62% catch percentage. I mean, look, this guy can play, and put him in an offense with a new coaching staff. If they can get their hands on him and get a feel for where he needs to improve, I think this is a guy that has a pretty solid foundation right now that has learned the game so quickly, and he plays well beyond his years. He's a smart receiver. He knows how to use his speed to get around and buy corners and in between the safeties, and he's got great hands. You throw it up to him, if it's anywhere in reach, he will go and get it. So this is a guy that has a great foundation already, and if he can really hit his stride, coming into the NFL and really buy in, I think this is a guy that has pretty high potential.
All right. So, Chris, I want to address the elephant in the room. Earlier, we talked about John Timu and his hot seat. There's a former first-round pick now on this roster in Kevin White, who we already know his seat's been getting warmer and warmer as fans are becoming more and more impatient with him. Again, I think the Bears, they've mentioned it, they're going to give him every chance, but also you can tell they're not going to really bank on it. They're going to give him his chance, but bringing in other guys who are going to be ready to kind of assume his role. But I want to know, if you had to give it, let's go with a scale 1 to 10. How hot is Kevin White's seat right now?
I'm going to go with a 6. It would be higher if his contract was not guaranteed, like it would be if it was a 5th-year option where you could cut him with no issue. But I'm going to go 6 just because they already have all the money devoted to him. They're going to give him every chance to make the roster. But I don't think we should ever expect anything out of Kevin White in a Bears uniform. And this is coming from a guy who was very, very high on him when he came out. I had high hopes. I was pumped with the pick, but yeah, he's definitely don't expect anything out of him. But I lean towards him making the team right now over a guy like Javon, or I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but I lean towards Kevin White making the team over him just because they're not. Kevin White can't be stashed on the practice squad like Wims can.
Sure. I mean, even Wims, I'm worried now. The more I think about it, with all this potential, like Michael's bringing up, if you put him on the practice squad, I mean, you're just begging for another team to go ahead and poach him and put him on their active roster.
Yeah.
And I think NFL teams, when you have a guy who's 6'4", who can run good routes, who has a catch radius as much as Wims has, can go up there and win those contested balls. I think those guys are few, far, and in between in the NFL. So that's kind of worrisome to think if the Bears would put him on the practice squad. So maybe he is a guy who is. Has that chance of making the roster. Again, 7th round picks. You never want to say they're a roster lock, but he seems like a good one at that for anyone who is a quote unquote 7th rounder. But yeah, he's a guy who brings the size. He brings a little bit of speed to him, for at least for his size. He's someone who's a little bit savvy with his route running. I see here he's very good at varying his speed during the routes to kind of make, like Michael brought up, corners bite a little bit on some routes, gain a little bit of that separation. And he doesn't even need a ton with his catch radius, his aggressiveness to go up and get the football. If Trubisky throws it to him and he's heavily covered, he's going to be aggressive. He's going to make sure he gets himself in a position to go ahead and get that football. But guys, we're here. It's the 7th round. I'm getting a little bit famished. I'm not going to lie. We've had some donuts a couple rounds ago, and that's been about it. So I'm about ready to call this a draft. All right. So putting it all together real quick, I just want to know your final thoughts. You don't have to go pick by pick, but just overall thoughts on how Ryan Pace did. I know later on this week, we're going to have Adam Johns on. We're going to have JJ Stankovitz as well on talking about this draft, recapping this draft a little bit more coming up on Tuesday. But as of right now, as of Saturday, as the draft is officially coming to a close, guys, I want to know your final thoughts on Ryan Pace's now 4th draft. Man, time is flying by here for Ryan Pace here in Chicago. But as his 4th draft, last year it seemed like he got a lot of projects, guys who maybe, I mean, not projects per se, not all of them, but when you're looking at like a Tariq Cohen and Adam Shaheen, stuff like that, you have guys who you can tell needed a little bit more time, maybe a different system in place. But now we got some guys early on who I think are instant plug-and-play starters, and now at the end, you're getting some role players, some guys who can maybe groom into some bigger roles on this team. So just final thoughts in general on Ryan Pace's 4th overall draft. And Michael, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
You want to grade with this one as well?
If you want, yeah.
I'm going to give it a B. I'll start out with that. I think to get an A, I need to look back at who you've picked, where you picked them, and say, okay, I see talent and I see the direction you're headed. I like it. Let's get it going. A. I see the talent here, not to an A caliber extent. I see the talent, but I feel like there are still some holes. I don't know if you guys agree with me. There aren't a ton, but I feel like I'm coming away from this draft thinking we could have done a little more here. We could have done a little better. We could have addressed a couple more issues here. So I think they did a nice job accumulating some talent. There are a couple of head scratchers, most of which we covered today. Mm-hmm. But within those head scratchers, me personally, I see the potential. So I want to see a little bit of a clearer path as opposed to what we have now where it's talent, but I don't know that we're necessarily locked in and going in one direction. So I'd like to see a little bit of a clearer path as to what the plan is to grow and become a contender. And but I like the talent. So I think this weekend was a B. Thursday and Friday, A. Mm-hmm. A-A. Overall, as a whole, I think it's a B.
So does that drop like today to like a C?
Today, I'd probably put it at a C plus B minus. I know that math doesn't really check out, but there were more picks today than there were Thursday, Friday. Is that right? Is that math right? I'm not a math guy, so
neither am I. I'm communications dude.
So we'll pretend like it is. So I think overall it was a B weekend.
There we go. Yeah, we can fake math on here. That's okay. No doubt about it. All right, so Chris, I want to go to you, but before I do, I just want to mention to Bears fans real quick. Like, hey, Ryan Pace, he's mentioned time and time again that the way to sustain and have sustained success in the NFL is building your team through the draft. So as much as we're maybe a little confused on some of these picks, again, I'm not even highly confused. It's just some of these picks you maybe have lower expectations, but let them exceed them, right? You can have high hopes, but lower expectations. These are guys who Ryan Pace must have a decent belief that they can become a part of this team's foundation for longevity of both, like Trubisky, right? You have with Trubisky, you have someone in Wims and someone in Millers, maybe some wide receivers that he can build a chemistry with and have some success right now, and then of course down the road in the future. So maybe Wims isn't someone who bursts onto the scene here in 2018, but maybe 2019 his name starts getting out there a little bit more, and maybe by 2020 people are thinking, wow, Javon Wims, Well, how come he was drafted all the way in the 7th round? He should have gone way sooner. So maybe they can build that special chemistry here. But Chris, over to you. Final thoughts on this draft as a whole?
As far as the Javon Wims pick, I'll give it a B minus just because I think he is a high upside guy. And last round, I told you guys to look out for Brandon Graham as like the potential highest upside that Kylie Fitz could be. Well, I'll give you a name that Bears fans know everywhere for the highest upside that Javon Wims could be, and that's Alshon Jeffrey. I just think he plays the same way. I think they're very similar in the way that they can shield the cornerbacks and go up and get balls. They don't, not necessarily elite athletes, which we all know Alshon Jeffrey wasn't, but he was still a good football player because he knew body leverage and body control. As far as the draft goes as a total, Pace kind of went 3 different ways with his picks. The first 3 were plug-and-play starters, producers in college, really good. I think Roquan Smith's 21, so he's got a lot of years in him. James Daniels, as you mentioned, was 20, so he'll be in the league for a long time. Anthony Miller's a little bit older, but just all 3 plug-and-play guys. Then you have the high upside project guys and Iggy.
Just call him Iggy. Just call him Iggy.
And Bilal Nichols. I think those are 2 high upside guys that are going to be projects for the coaching staff. And then you get 2 guys that fell possibly because of age for Wims and then age and injury for Kylie Fitz. So I think he went 3 different ways. You can almost break it into different sections for each part of the draft. So I like what he did. I would give it up probably around a B to a B plus range. The more I see with Bilal Nichols, the more I like. The more I see with Fitz, the more I like. I still am a little bit iffy on that Iggy pick. Just don't know enough about him, but I like the last 2 picks. I think they're both high upside guys. I like Bilal. I think he's high upside. And I love that he got 3 starters in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I will say first 3, but yeah, 3 starters with the first 3 picks, which again, when you're doing that, you're doing something right here as a GM. And then at the end, you're trying to go with trying to find the most upside, trying to find the most potential, the guys who can stick it through, get with good coaching, kind of groom into some players that you vision. And of course, Coach Nagy, he was someone who was super high in Anthony Miller. You have to wonder his thoughts here too with Wims, because I'm sure they would not have drafted it if Pace was. I mean, if both Pace and Nagy were like, I don't know how he fits. I'm sure they have a role that they can envision him growing into within this offense. And of course, I like the size that they're bringing, because now with Robinson, you have decent size. Wims, you have size, and there's just so much speed now on this Bears offense. You can really beat defenses in a multitude of ways. So yeah, when I'm thinking about this draft as a whole, again, you guys really hit on all the main points. So I'm not really going to kind of beat the bush, beat around the bush, beat the dead horse, whatever analogy. As you can tell, I'm getting very hungry, guys, but whatever analogy I was going for there, you know where I was getting. It's been a long weekend, hasn't it, guys? Anyone?
For you more than me.
That's true.
You've been really grinding.
That's true. That's true. I appreciate all your guys' help though throughout the entirety of this weekend. Brandon for the first couple of days, Nick throughout the first 3 days until just now with the last couple, or just the last one. I forget. It's honestly, things are starting to run together. But to collect my thoughts, I believe Pace put together a very solid draft. I'm going to give it a B plus. I think there's some positions that maybe weren't addressed that surprised me. But again, I'm not in the war room. I'm not in the scouting department. I don't know this team as well as they do in the ins and outs, the kind of players they have in the locker room. They know that just a little bit more, and they've put together such a strong offseason. I don't see there's any way that they would come out here and botch day 3 purposefully. So I'm going to trust their judgment here. We'll see how all of these picks pan out. But as of right now, I'm very excited with the Bears offseason. And I said it on Wednesday that a very strong draft can put this team really much over the top, especially compared to where they've been over the past, almost decade. I think the Bears are really primed to take that next step. They have a lot of intriguing young talent, and it's exciting to see how they're all going to fit. So I think I'm going to wrap up right now with just thanking you all who are still watching live. Over 100 live viewers with round 7 of the draft. I mean, that's some dedication right there. And if this is the first video that you've found us for some reason, definitely go back. We talk about every single one of the Bears draft picks all weekend long. And if you're someone who's listened all the way from the Roquan Smith analysis all the way through this other Georgia Bulldog here in Wims, I just want to thank you just a little bit extra. Pat yourself on the back. That's some serious dedication to sit here and listen to hours of analysis on all these Bears picks. But I'm glad we're able to provide you with the analysis and the insight that you are looking for. But yeah, and Wims, to round it off, Pace wants guys from championship backgrounds. As he likes small school guys, but he likes guys who knows how to win. He was the leading receiver on a team that was the runner-up for the national championship. So don't when you're thinking about Wims, just know he comes from a winning pedigree. He's going to come here hungry, and he wants to continue winning, no doubt about it. So yeah, very strong draft for Ryan Pace. Maybe day 3 got a little fuzzy here and there, but we'll see how it all pans out. I'm very excited to see what all these rookies can do. And don't forget, the undrafted free agency period, Ryan Pace tends to find at least one guy out of there that can end up starting and being a decent player for this team as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode of the Bears Brothers podcast. Thank you all who watched live. Thank you to all of our podcast listeners. We'll be back on Tuesday with some more recap analysis. We're going to have Adam Johns on, and of course, JJ Stankovitz from NBC Sports Chicago. He does the Under Center podcast if you're looking for more Bears talk out there. But until next time, hope you enjoyed draft weekend as much as we did, but it's time for me to get some food. I've been sitting in front of this camera all day long. So until next time, enjoy your Sunday, enjoy your Monday. We'll talk to you Tuesday. But until then, bear down, Chicago.